Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook for Leaders and Entrepreneurs. Today, we have a truly fascinating guest, someone who's not only been a successful entrepreneur, but he's spent over 20 years mastering the art of public speaking. And trust me, when you hear our guest speak, you don't just listen, you lean in, you laugh, and you might wonder where is he getting all these stories from? So let's give a big welcome to the one and only Jim Gregory to the show. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. That's a lovely introduction. Are you sure it's for mine? You've not got somebody else's intro. You've got me mixed up with someone else.
100% you, Jim.
Right.
And and Jim, I know you don't use your LinkedIn profile, but I thought I'll just check it out today. And you had a line in your bio that said having great ideas and converting them into reality. Tell me about that a little.
Well, it's like one of my favorite sayings, which is never confuse movement with action. There's a lot of people you'll see that years ago when I worked for big companies like Xerox, you'd often see people walking around the office with papers under their arm or something in their hand, looking very very serious and moving directly, but they weren't doing anything. They were just giving the impression that they were doing something. They were probably going to the toilet to read the paper or something, because in those days you didn't have your phone, so you couldn't sit on the toilet scrolling. You had to hide the Daily Mirror, or some of the posher people were using the Telegraph or something, and you had to stick it up your jumper or up your jacket and go in the toilet and read it. So yeah, that was movement with purpose. So the ideas are cheap. Everybody will tell you it's a well-known fact that you can have 1,000 ideas a minute, but they're no use on their own. You've got to do something with them. I once did an interview with a newspaper, and with all this, he said, "I need to finish off with a quote, Jim." I said, "Well, I forget who said it, but there's the famous quote of, success is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration." And he went, "Yeah, that's great." And when he printed it, it came out as Jim's quote was, "Success is 10%." That was it. I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, we had to shorten it a bit." I said, "But you lost all the complete meaning of the phrase." "Oh, well, nobody will notice," he said. "Hardly anybody reads it." "Oh, thanks." Yeah. So, yeah, you've got to convert ideas into action.
Yes, I would say advice on someone who might have a good idea, but they're struggling to get it into fruition because there are so many people who have amazing ideas, but they never take action.
Well, one of the problems is people don't have the framework. It's all right having actions and ideas, but they're all built on foundations. You've got to have foundations for things. And these foundations of people, they're not getting them. They're not being inculcated. People are starting from the wrong end. Everybody wants a quick fix. I used to go and do reports to the managing director, and he was one of these that used to say, "Give me the bottom line, give me the bottom line." So you said, "Well, the bottom line is we're up 20%." He said, "Well, how did we get there?" And he'd do the thing backwards. You'd say, "Well, the reason for look, if you just let me start at the beginning and tell you what happened, and then we'll arrive at a bottom line." But no, no, he wanted to cut to the chase all the time, and that, I'm afraid, is a modern ailment that we've got at the moment. People have an idea for a business, and they think they can just go off and do it, and they haven't got the grounding, they haven't got the foundation, they haven't got the infrastructure in place. So I suppose I've not listened to all of your podcasts. I've only listened to a couple, but one thing that you do see is that people often started doing things perhaps when they were at school, and I mean junior school or even primary school. I mean, I was trying to sell things to my granny at the age of 8. I was trying to sell doll's house furniture to the girls in the class when I was 9 and 10. I mean, I didn't give myself the title of entrepreneur or anything. I just wanted some money. So another of your guests, I heard he tried selling doorbells. No, the spy hole things. Me and my friend, this later life when we were about, I don't know, 18, we made up a board which had a doorbell on it, which was now I'm sorry for your listeners, I don't know how old they are, but once upon a time, doorbells, if you had a doorbell, went bring, bring. And a company called Friedland brought one out that went ding dong. And they're in Stockport, and we heard about this amazing new doorbell. And I managed to persuade them to sell them to us on a trade basis. So we put them on a board with a spy hole and with one of those security chain things. And we went knocking on doors. And what we used to do was we used to tap very gently on the door and then build up the knocking. And the lady would come to the door, or the gent would come to the door and say, "Oh, I didn't hear you. What you need is a doorbell."
Love that.
And they would say, "We just happen to be here. We will fit them on the spot. Won't take 5 minutes. We do a perfect job, and it'll only cost you whatever it cost you." And it was like shelling peas. People go, "Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, love. All right, I'll go and get some money," or and they get the little biscuit tin out and give you £10 or whatever. And we had a manual drill. It wasn't electric. There was no power drill, no battery drill. We'd drill a hole in the door, and we'd put the battery. Yeah, it was great. And then one time we knocked on the door. He said, "Have you got a license?" I said, "A license? Well, you don't need a license for doorbells." He said, "Yeah, you need a license for selling. You are hawking." Hawking? Yes, I could report you to the police. Oh dear. Well, do you want a doorbell? No, go away. So we went to the police. We went in and said, "Excuse me, we're selling these doorbells. We didn't want to break any laws. Can you tell us what law we're breaking?" And he said, "No, we're not bothered." I said, "Well, we don't want to break any laws." He says, "Hang on." So he comes back. He said, "Yeah, you need a hawking license. It allows you to go door to door and sell things." I said, "Oh, how do I get one? What do they cost?" I forget what it was, but he said, "Well, there's a loophole." And I said, "What's the loophole?" He says, "Well, if you just take an order and come back later, then you don't need a license." So I said, "Oh, that's great. That's what we'll do." So we just used to knock on the door, still sold the thing, still got the order, and said, "Right, our installer chap will be along in 10 minutes. And that's what happened. He would go back and install it. So we did that. Unfortunately, we fell out because, and there's a lesson for this, I suppose, and that is partnerships are a very, very tenuous thing. You've got to be careful when you do a partnership in business. You've got to be really careful about partnerships, as in life, of course. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same
true.
finding a partner to spend the rest of your life with. So no, Patrick and I fell out because he felt that he was doing more work than me. This is something that is a recurring theme, I think, in life. People often think that the person that sells something does less work than the person that makes something or installs something. He felt that he was doing all the work installing these, and all I was doing was swanning around saying, "Hey, do you want one? Yeah, there you go. Pat, drill a hole." And he felt he should get more of the money, and I felt 50-50 was still equitable. So I thought, "That's okay. We'll just stop doing it." I was fed up doing it anyway. But yeah, it made a few bob. But that's it. You see, you got to take that as a little example, right? To sell those door to door, and this applies to any business. There are laws involved, so it's a good idea to check what you're doing legally and whether you're breaking any laws. Whether you're, I mean, I know a guy who's an artist. He used to rip off famous paintings and what have you. He wasn't exactly a forger, but he got in trouble for that. He got fined something like £25,000 because he didn't look into the legalities of things. Then there's the fact that we had to negotiate a wholesale price with Friedland. Um, you know, we didn't have those at a cheap price. We couldn't do them at a good price. We couldn't make a profit. Whereas, so the idea of selling doorbells was a good one, but we needed the tools to drill the holes. We needed the actual products. We needed to set up a demonstration board, and we needed a spiel, if you like, to tell people on the door. All that infrastructure, although it was only a silly little business, it had to be in place. And a lot of people would just go straight to knocking on doors saying, do you want a doorbell? Yeah, all right, thanks. And get their orders and then go off and try and buy them. People often put the cart before the horse. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
So I've got a few questions on what you said. So firstly, on frameworks and foundations. So what do you mean? What frameworks are important for us to take
Well,
action?
well, I've just mentioned several. No matter what business you're in, whatever you're trying to do, this may not be how some people want to approach life, but I've always wanted to be legal. I've always wanted to be
Right.
honest, and I've always wanted to be, genuine. So you've got to think about whether what you're doing is in any way uh, illegal or in bad taste or is going to adversely affect someone or whatever. I think that's an important consideration to start with. So these are the foundation elements. But there's
Oh,
other
right. Okay.
foundation elements when you're at school. It, People say, "Oh, they didn't teach me anything that I no, that nothing." Well, who needs to know calculus? Who needs to know the history of whatever? And I suppose they could be right, but then again, you're getting this opportunity to learn things. And if you did learn even basic maths, that's very useful in business. A bit of
Hmm.
history, a bit of English, being able to write, being able to write a letter, being able to write a spiel for an advert or whatever. These are things that you should be learning. But unfortunately, a lot of teachers don't teach them in the context of, but they think they can just go out, get on TikTok, um, record themselves falling downstairs, and they're a star, you know. And then that's maybe possible. That may be me being old fashioned, thinking that you've got to do things in a more structured way. Maybe you can just start filming yourself running in front of traffic and get likes, at least until you're hit by a bus. So yeah, you've got to get the basics. You've got to
Yeah. True.
got to be able to read and write. You've got to be able to talk to people. You've got to be able to present your case. You've got to be able to think it through. And those are very basic things. When you get to doing a business, you've got to decide whether you're going to be a formal business, whether you're going to register with the. I mean, a lot of people start doing this so-called side hustle, and of course they don't tell the authorities. They don't say to anyone. They just start earning some money, and next thing you know, the bank has to report any earnings over a certain amount of money. And as soon as you get to that stage, you've got a knock on the door from a man from HMRC. And I don't know whether people know this, but if you're given a tax bill, you are guilty until proven innocent. It's not the usual rule. If they say you owe them £20,000, you owe them £20,000. You can't dispute it, and they often ask you to prove a negative, and that's not possible. So get your ducks in a row first. One of the great joys of running a business can be to keep good books, because I always, any business I did, especially in the early days, I would always I would always work together with my lovely wife Val. I was a very good bookkeeper, and we would make sure that we recorded all of our expenditures and all of our income. And you can often prove, and we had an occasion to prove that we hadn't made any money. Right? If we don't make any money, you don't have to pay it in tax. Obviously, we had made money. We'd paid our expenses. We'd paid to live. We'd fed ourselves. We just hadn't made surplus on which you pay tax. So these are important foundations that you need
No,
to
makes
understand.
sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. And you also mentioned when you were knocking on doors, you were getting some rejections as well. So
God, yeah.
how did you keep your head high and keep moving forward with all those rejections you were getting along the way?
It's never been a concern to me. There are some classic sales stories which have been told 1,000 times. There's the one about the guy who sells double glazing, and he's been doing it for years, and he's very successful. And he gets a trainee put with him for a couple of days, for a week, to teach him the ropes. And he says, "Okay, lad, we're going out. We're going to do house to house calling." And he says, "Oh, I don't know. I'm frightened about that. What if they don't like you?" He says, "What do you mean? Hardly anybody will like you. Come on, we'll show you." So he knocks on the first door, and the woman says, "Please go away." Uh, and he knocks on the next door, and he says, he questions his birth um, history, and the next one, and he knocks on 20 doors, and every one has basically used variations of the phrase "go away."
Okay.
And this lad's next to him, and he says, "Oh my God," he says, "I can't do this." He says, "Well, keep it up, keep it up." He says, "We've got another two or three to knock on, and then we'll get an order." He says, "Really?" He says, "Well, yeah, watch." So he knocks on the door, the woman opens. He says, "Oh, what?" He said, "We're doing double glazing, madam. Got a special offer in the area." "Oh," she said, "I was just thinking of having the windows done. Come in, I'll give you a cup of tea." And he goes in and he talks to her, and they come out and they've got an order. And so, "Oh, that was lucky." And he says, "It's not lucky. It's just the numbers game. I find that for every 20 numbers I knock on, I get one order. I get one person who's interested. And for every 20 people who are interested, I get a sale. And so as long as I can do enough calls in a day, I will get enough sales." And everything falls down to the numbers game. Even when you're playing online games where you've got to have so many click throughs in order to convert them, and you get the funnel system where you've got what we used to call suspects coming in the top, turning into prospects, then turning into sales. That system is the fundamental bedrock of all selling. It's a numbers game. You've got to work out what you're selling and present people to the risk of buying. And that,
Amazing.
as long as that's in your mind, as long as you know that everyone's not going to be successful, you're okay. And in fact, you can start to enjoy it. You can start to have a laugh with people. You can start to acknowledge the fact that they may not be interested. I mean, one of the tricks we used to do, people say, "I'm not interested." And there's a whole, later on in life, I went on some super duper training for this sort of thing, but I intuitively knew this. There are certain replies you can have to standard rejections. There's a whole list of them. There's a famous document, I've got it somewhere, and it has every objection that somebody could come up with a response and a way to deal with it. So, for instance, if somebody says, I mean, it's often designed for on the phone. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. But if somebody says to you, "Oh, I'm not interested," you say, "Oh, I realize that. That's why I've just called to ask whether you would be interested. Do you know anybody in the area that might be interested? Or have you got any relatives that might be interested?" And sometimes they'll say, "Oh, actually, John and Jane have just got married. They've moved into a house. They might be interested. I'll give you their address." So sometimes a rejection can turn into an introduction. So there's always
Mm,
that.
that's a nice one.
If you're on the phone, I mean, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this story. It's a true story, but it says a lot. It perhaps says something about me that I don't want you to know. But anyway, I'm in a training course at Xerox. There's about 20 of us in this session, and he's talking about getting through and making appointments on the phone. And he's saying how many calls you have to make to get appointments and all that. And we have this formula for getting through to people. And he said, "Right, Jim, here you go. Here's a phone." And he puts the phone on the desk. This is before mobile phones. We used to have, you won't know this, but there used to be like a device with wires, and it had circular
Yeah,
things. And
I've been alive.
you used to put your finger in, and then, but it wasn't quite that. These were actually advanced. These were touch buttons where you could
All
dial
right.
somebody up. So he says, "Dial up one of your prospects and make an appointment to go in to to see them, but somebody you've not seen before." Oh God! And he said, "And we'll all listen in." Now, when
Ooh.
he said listen in, he was only going to be able to listen into my side. It wasn't plugged into the other side. So
Right.
I dial up and I go, "Oh, hi, it's Jim Gregory here from Xerox. I'm wondering if I could speak to Jack Scruggins." Um, no, I realise he's busy. That's why I'm ringing. I've been asked to speak to him. Could you put me through to him? I'll take 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah. No. If you just put me through, he'll be quite pleased to get my call. I think he's expecting something from me. Okay, thanks. Oh, hi, Jack. It's Jim from Xerox. No, you don't know me. But I'd like to know you. I'd like to come along, and I'll go through all the. Well, no, I wouldn't expect you to look into something that you haven't considered. So that's why I want to come along and describe it to you. Yes, you did have one of these in the past. Our records show that, but we've improved them a lot. And that's why I want to demonstrate to you the improvements that we've made. So, should we say Wednesday at 2 o'clock, or would Thursday at 10 would be better for you? And you used to do this alternatives things with. And they said, right, okay, fine. Well, that's great. I'll see you on Friday at 2 then. Look forward to it. Cheers. Boom. Right. And he turned to the crowd and said, "Wow, Jim, you did that brilliantly. That was absolutely exactly how. And you got the meeting." I said, "Yeah." What he didn't hear was the other side, which went, "Hello, Jim. Why are you calling me at work?" Uh, oh, I see. Oh, I see. You're pretending. Okay, I'll pretend that I'm a customer, right? And it was my wife I was calling, right? And then she said, "Oh no, I don't want one of your smell. I don't want." She's saying, "I don't want one of your smelly machines." And I said, "No, I realise that." And then she say, "I'm very busy." You know, no, I realise you're busy. That's why. Shall we? Oh, for God's sake, I'm fed up. I'll see you on Friday. All right. So yeah, the method does work. It works especially well on your wife. Yeah. So there was a bit of a twist to this. At the end of it, he said, "Right, Jim, and what I'll do is I'll come out with you on that call, and we'll see how it goes." Uh, okay. so so then I had to actually arrange a call with someone that matched the time that I'd made up with my
Oh my
wife.
God, Jim.
Deep joy. And I'll tell you, working for Xerox was fascinating.
We met at a public speaking cup called Toastmasters. So I want to know, how did you get into the field of public speaking, or did something happen in your career that ignited you to get better at the skill?
I'm not typical at all when it comes to this. I know a lot of people in public speaking say something like, "I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't go on stage. Or I had to tame my butterflies to get them to fly in formation." All of these things, but I was never in that situation. Um, I think because I was born, my left eye doesn't work, and I've always had what they call strabismus, which means your eyes don't point exactly in the same direction. And and I think that sort of taught me at school to be vocal and to defend myself and to be funny and interesting or whatever you want to put it. And which I was. I never really was bullied. I never had any problem. I used to deal with it all quite well. So I was a kid in junior school. I was a guy that would go out and explain to people how a three-stage rocket. In fact, the first day I went to the next level school from the primary school, we went into the class and the headmaster was there and he said, and on the board was a drawing of a three-stage rocket. And he said, "You're in the big school now, and we'll be teaching you things like, for instance, you won't know what this is on the board. Does anybody know what it is?" And I put my hand up, something I've always done. I put my hand up and said, "Yes, sir, I know." And he said, "Oh, do you?" "Yes, sir." "Well, would you like to come out and explain it to the class then?" "Oh, yes, sir." So he thought I go, "Oh, no, sir, no, no." So I went out and said, "Right, well, the reason you've got to get into orbit, you need the power of this, you need things. So you can't get up with all the weight. So you discharge the first stage, you drop this, round about 50,000 feet, you would drop the thing." And I did all this in depth because I used to be really fascinated with space travel. I mean, I still am. Um, and I did all, and he said, "Wow, that's really excellent. Sit down." And after that, I was the guy that used to do the reading in church. I was the guy that used to read out the sessions. I was the guy that did the drawing on the board to set things up. Set things up. So even at that, then we used to have debates and mock trials. We used to do mock trials. Um, I, I once defended a guy called Eichmann, again, nobody watching this will know who Eichmann was, but he was a nasty German who killed lots of people, and he was on trial. He was actually eventually killed, you know, put to death as a punishment, and I managed to get him off. I managed to persuade the class that we shouldn't kill him because killing was wrong. I argued that if it's wrong for him to do it, it's wrong for us to do it. So I think we should punish him more by putting him in prison for the rest of his life. And they went along with that. So there was that. When they had the school um, shows at Christmas, me and a friend called Sydney Goodbody, what a great name. We had a double act. We used to go on stage with our comedy act, which apparently was very successful. I can't remember most of it now, obviously, but apparently it was successful. So yeah, I've always done that. And when I went to senior school, I organised the debate society. I ran the school newspaper. I did all sorts of stuff, mainly to stop me having to go outside at playtime and play football or something.
So you've always been a great speaker then.
I wouldn't say I was great. I've certainly been vocal.
So how
Uh,
did you get into Toastmasters then?
Toastmasters, fast forward, I was running my own business. We were quite successful. But one of the ways we used to get business, this was a business that did web design and e-commerce facilities. And we joined something called Business Network International, or BNI. We used to meet at 7 o'clock on a Friday morning, and it was great. We used to get tens of thousands of pounds worth of business out of it. And there was a big area meeting of all the BNI groups. There would be, I don't know, about 700, 800 people in a hotel at the airport. And I was just there enjoying it. And then one of the organizers came up to me at the break and said, Jim, we've just had a cancellation. One of the guys that's going to do the next 1 hour session, he can't show up. I said, oh dear. He said, well, will you do it? And I said, well, when? He said, well, we're back on in 20 minutes. And I said, well, what do you want? He said, well, do it about anything. He said, you can do anything you like, but we've got an hour to fill. I said, oh, well, okay, I'll think of something. So again, there used to be a guy called Ted Rogers, who was a presenter of a very tawdry TV show. And he had this thing about 3, 2, 1, which was his little thing he used to do with his hands. And we had a thing called 1-to-1, where you would meet people within the what we call a chapter for the networking group. You would meet with them on a 1-to-1 basis and see how you could help each other in your businesses by sharing customers, by sharing contacts, ideas, working together, all sorts of things. And so I thought I'll do a session on 1-to-1. But I had the whole assembly going with the hands 1, 2, 1, right? And it was power. I loved the power. Suddenly you go, okay, all together now, 1, 2, 1, right? And everybody's going 1, 2, 1. I don't know, all the power. I love it. So that went down well. And he came up to me afterwards and said, George, that was fantastic. He said, at the drop of a hat, you were able to do that. That's really good. Have you ever thought of joining Toastmasters? And I said, what the hell's Toastmasters? I would have been, well, I don't know. How old would I have been? I can't remember. It was about 25 years ago anyway. And he explained to me what Toastmasters was. He said he was in a club in London and it was great. We should start one in Manchester. So I said, okay. So we spent the next month or two going around pubs, asking them whether they could host a club meeting. So yeah, so we decided we wrote off to Toastmasters and said we'd like to start a club. And they wrote back and said, well, somebody else has said they want to start a club in Manchester. We'll get you together. So we met up with this German guy, and the three of us basically set up the first club in Manchester. At the time, there were no clubs between Birmingham and Glasgow, none, right? And so we started Manchester Orators, The name came from, um, I didn't come up with the name, somebody else chose the name. Um, Decided to call it Manchester Orators. We had a free room to start with because this guy had an arrangement with solicitors and they had a training room, so we used to meet there. And it just took off straight away. I got friends to come. We basically used word of mouth and people inviting their friends and colleagues in to get it. So within 6 months, we had enough members to start a club, but we waited a year because we wanted to build up some money in the bank, which turned out to be a good thing because we had to move from the free place to somewhere we paid for later. And it was off.
Amazing.
And then from that, we spun off five, six other clubs.
Okay, Jim, the fear of public speaking is called as glossophobia, and they say that the statistics say that people rather prefer to die than speak in front of people. So I want to know, how can we really overcome the fear of public speaking, and where is this fear coming from?
Right. Can I just address something first, which is one of my pet hates here? Innumerable times in books, magazine articles, presentations online, people will quote a an article which was in the Sunday Times or the Times, where they did a list of people's fears, and they misquote it. They all misquote it, right? And this is an interesting thing. Of today, we suffer a lot from people misquoting surveys, and this is why it is good to go to school and learn about things, but people don't. The fact is, when you do a survey, you've got to be careful with how you quote the results. You see, if you asked any single person, would you rather go on stage and make a presentation, or would you rather I shot you now dead? I'm confident that they would choose to go on stage and say some words, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yet people always say people would prefer to die rather than do public speaking, right? That's not what happened. What happened was they asked a number of people to list things that they were frightened of, right? And 100 people listed things they were frightened of, and they included the obvious: spiders, being poor, dying, public speaking, and more people included public speaking as something they were frightened of than included death as being something that they were frightened
Ah,
of,
right, makes
right?
sense.
So that doesn't mean that people are more frightened of one than the other. It means more people include that as a fear than death. And the fact is, death is nothing that you should be frightened of because, and speaking as somebody who's hopefully, possibly, probably closer to it than you are, I'm not frightened of it. I think we pretty much all have worked out by now that there's nothing you can do about it. So you've got to accept it. So death often isn't a fear for people, whereas public speaking remains a near and present danger. So, yes, it's going to be high up in the list, but it doesn't actually mean. And what happens is with the glossophobia aspect of it, by people mentioning that and by people justifying it and saying, hey, people would rather, it's worse than death. That builds it. That makes people even more
More
frightened,
fearful, yeah.
more fearful. And so that's a bad thing. The fact is that there's only one way to overcome a fear of public speaking, as indeed a fear of anything, and that is exposure. And by that, I don't mean taking your clothes off and running down the street. I mean, whatever it is that you're frightened of, a, 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 approach it, contain it, perhaps in sport, perhaps if you're frightened of spiders, just at a distance, perhaps use a pretend one to get you into the group. And with public speaking, we in Toastmasters would try and get people up to, first of all, for instance, introduce another member or to do timer job or to do one of the other roles where they have a public speaking role, but they don't have to present a speech. And then we will build them up slowly to the stage where they're coming out to say, just answer a question, which is no different than being in the pub. If somebody in the pub and somebody says, "Hey, what do you think about that program on television last night?" Nobody says, "Oh, I'm frightened of answering that question because I don't want to speak." They don't say that in a pub, do they? I mean, there may be one or two people
Interesting.
who've got a real problem, but no. So we try to make it a comfortable environment. We try to
Mm.
make it, everybody's on the same level. Nobody's training, nobody's teaching, there's nobody superior. It's a mutually supportive environment. So people gradually get the confidence up. And we've seen, and this is the joy for me of Toastmasters, we've seen people join us shivering, nervous wrecks and end up as presidents of the club, joining in and settling things and sorting things out. And this is the important thing, have then gone on to be promoted within their business or have gone on to do other things built upon that foundation. That's what I was referring to earlier. If you're going to go into entrepreneurship or whatever, there are certain foundation elements that you need. And one of them has to be the ability to vocalize your thoughts and to share ideas.
100%. And in Toastmasters as well, we have something called table topics, which is improvisation. So, why do you think improvisation can help us become better speakers and can help leaders succeed in a corporate setting?
Well, yeah, improvisation was what I was referring to earlier. We call it table topics. The story is that Ralph C. Smedley, who started Toastmasters 100 years ago, he saw it as public speaking, being doing an after dinner speech, that sort of thing. So table topics were things that would be discussed around the table. So it's just impromptu speaking, off the cuff, unprepared. And of course, most of the things in life are exactly that. We seldom have chance to sit down and write out what we're going to say to anyone. And worse than that, if we do, it's never as good. It's far better to get to the stage where it's natural. And these days, the formal speech where you say, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present with you," and then you're reading it. You're going with something that's obviously prepared, and is more designed to be read than it is to be heard. There's a complete difference between a written piece of text and a spoken piece of text. And by having people just do 2 minute sessions where they just speak about some random item, that gets them used to thinking on their feet. It gets them used to putting together a very short message with a beginning, middle, and end, and presenting an idea to people and sharing things on a personal level. And that, I believe, in Toastmasters, table topics is the most valuable part, and it's the greatest skill for people to have. If somebody's going to present an idea to people, they need to be able to answer questions on the spot. They can't sit there and say, "Hang on, I've worked out a response to that. Let me find it on my phone." Yes, the question. What was the question? What would I do if X Y Z? Well, if X Y Z, I would A B C. You can't do that in an interview. You've got to be ready,
True.
and that is the essence of Toastmasters, to get people ready and prepared to
Yeah,
talk.
yeah, very well explained. And as you said, you don't have to read, you have to be heard. So that's a powerful
We,
thing.
we, we try to discourage people from, I mean, in the early stages, they've written the speech, they'll go up, and that's part of the training, if you like. In the first couple of speeches, people often read, but we try as soon as possible to stop them reading. And then, oddly enough, later on, it is good to teach people the skill of being able to have some notes and refer to them, but it to seem to someone who's listening as if they're not reading. I mean, obviously, if you ever watch television with the news or whatever, they're reading stuff, but you can't tell that they're reading it. You can't. They've got the ability to. They can move their eyes in a way that means that you don't see their eyes reading the text. They've got their phrasing, which means it doesn't feel like they're reading something, and that's a different skill. That's a more advanced skill.
Nice. And tell us, our listeners, how can we get better at improvisation according to you?
Practice, practice, practice. It's the old story. This is the solution for everything. Practice, practice, practice. Uh,
Love it.
but it doesn't mean actually just practice at Toastmasters. It means with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mum, your dad, your cat, your dog, anybody who will listen. Actually, I knew one guy who was a very successful public speaker. He used to practice his speeches on his dog. He used to take his he used to take his dog out for a walk, and he'd sit in the park, and he'd start talking to his dog, and he said the dog probably didn't understand what he was saying, but if the dog looked away while he was speaking, he knew he wasn't capturing his attention. So he would he would learn to get better vocal variety and to keep the dog listening. He said, and sometimes he would say something a certain way, and the dog would just tilt its head on one side. And he said he knew that was a good line in his speech, and that would translate to audiences. The audiences didn't tilt the head on one side, but the dog intuitively knew when something was supposed to be interesting or when somebody was supposed to be engaging. So yeah, use your dog, but don't get a dog just for this. It's not a dog is quite an undertaking.
Yeah, 100%. That's a funny one, Jim. But also, like, there's so many people who join Toastmasters, but they never really improve their skills or never get better. So why do you think that happens?
Same with anything. I mean, how many people have decided that they want to get into a hobby or a sport, and they go out and they buy the racket or the ball, or they'll buy the top, they'll buy the outfit, they'll buy the stuff. They'll buy anything they can buy that they think is going to give them instant success, and they never use it. They never implement it. They don't do it. They think they can. The number of people who buy an exercise machine and it becomes a place to hang your wardrobe on, um, the number of people that buy uh, many things that they never use, and it's the same. We all know about the gym membership where everybody's really
Yeah.
keen. They want to get those abs. They want to have a body like mine, and they turn up. They might even get up at 5 o'clock to go to the gym. Yeah, once, and somehow the money keeps going out of the bank account, but they never manage to get any more fit because it wasn't the money going out of the bank account that was the problem. It was them actually doing something. And I often say in Toastmasters, you may know, we're a speaking club, not a listening
Mm,
club. Listening is
agree.
important. We all know about the two ears and the one mouth routine. We all know about that. We know it's important to listen, but it's a speaking club and you have to speak.
Yeah, 100% agree. And Jim, since you've been at Toastmasters for 20 years now, so I'm curious to know,
23 years now.
23 years, sorry. So how do you keep still improving your public speaking skills?
I've atrophied now. I am pretty much in a rut now. I think, you can, I'm happy to be open to feedback. I'm happy to perhaps change some things. But sometimes you get feedback and people say, oh, Jim, I don't want, I'd like you to be more serious, say. I get this sometimes. Well, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I've reached the stage now where I don't really care as much as I used to. And I'm just going to say things that I want to say when I want to say them. And if somebody's upset by it, obviously I don't want to upset anybody, but if it's just it's just sensibilities. If they're just annoyed because I said him instead of her, then I'm not going to accept that as feedback. I'm not going to, I'm not going to enter into the wokeism world. Um, so, so I'm afraid feedback to me is still valuable. I still listen to it. I still try and adapt to it. And sometimes, for instance, we've got a contest coming up, which is the International Speech Contest. Had the honour of winning it and going to America to represent
Really?
the UK a couple of years ago, um, because I actually tried that year. I actually wrote a speech, practiced a speech, and presented a speech that was designed specifically for the International Speech Contest. Usually I don't bother. Usually I just do a speech that I want to do, and if somebody likes it, that's fine.
What was this speech about?
It was about judging people, if you like. It was a story about how a girlfriend of mine had a brother who was autistic, and how the school football club were going playing his school, and they assumed that because it was a special school where kids had, difficulties, they assumed that they were going to wipe the floor with them, that they were going to come back with 20 goals to their nil. But what they didn't realize was that because the simple fact that because people are challenged in one way doesn't mean they're challenged in all ways. And the team ran circles around them and scored far more goals than them. And the special school won. And
Wow.
it was a lesson for them, and it was a lesson for me, that you shouldn't judge people's entire spectrum of abilities just based on one aspect of them. So that was basically the speech, and it did well. I mean, I got all the way to Las Vegas.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, that's a really good story, an inspiring one for sure. And I'm gonna take away as well. And like sometimes people fear or speaking in front of people because they're fearful of what other people would think about them. So as you said, you don't care like what other people think about you. So how can we really get to that stage that we become relentless, we go all out and stop worrying about other people
It's a very
say or
good.
think?
What you're mentioning is a very real issue at the moment. It's an issue for young people in particular, because unfortunately we've almost trained them. I say we, I mean the body that is the public, everybody, and nobody in particular sits them down and says you've got to behave like this, you've got to do that. They've got the pressures online, they've got the pressures that they see, and it's a real pressure to be judged, to try to appear to be this, that, or the other. And it's from everything. It's from clothes that you wear, it's from how your hair is, it's from whatever. The power is tremendous, and how you beat it, how you remove it, is a difficult one because nobody's solved it yet. People are killing themselves. They're actually killing themselves because they feel that they're judged, not wanted, not matching somebody's level of expectance. And they're seeing people who are being stupid online or doing ridiculous things or doing viral things, and I think that's what I want to do. That's how I'm going to get famous. I'm going to be online, drilling holes in my cheeks, um, to get likes, and that is a bad thing. It's the only way we can hope to address it is by telling people that they don't need to do it, and by reminding them, and by showing examples, and hoping that eventually people will realize that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. That nobody likes everybody, and everybody's got some people who, you know, it's just life. And like I say, I think I was helped by the fact I had the lazy eye thing when I was a kid, because yeah, sure, there were kids in the class who were unfortunately made fun of. Here's a funny story. I had the glasses, the National Health glasses, little wired glasses, the ones that
Yeah.
later in life, John Lennon had a pair, and he made them sort of famous, cool. Which was, he did it on purpose. He knew they weren't cool, but he knew if he started wearing them, they would become cool. And I had to wear these horrible glasses, and I hated them. And my mum said, when I was going to a new school, and she said, look, she said, people might make fun of you. They might make jokes about your glasses, but they're only having fun. They're not being nasty. They're just having a laugh. So just have a laugh with them and don't let it get to you. And I said, okay, Mom. So it's just fun. She said, it's just fun. So we go to school, and in the queue going into school, unbelievably now, there's a lad there, my age, obviously, and he's got a monocle, right? An actual single lens with a tassel hanging down on one of his eyes. And my mum had said to me that they might call you Specky Four Eyes, but don't worry, it's not being nasty. Okay. So I go up to him and I say, oh, look, Specky Three Eyes. Yeah. Because I thought that's funny. My mum's told me it's funny. He's got three eyes, four. And the kid's really upset about this. Can't be speculating. I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I was just joking." My mum said, "Don't do that. That's not nice." I said, "What? 1 minute is nice, next minute is not nice." And this is it. You've got to be consistent with your messages. You know, it's no good telling a kid they're making fun of you and it's all fun when it isn't. Better to say to them, you know, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that sort of thing. So yeah, I learned that was a very early lesson I learned there, that you don't make fun of people, even if it is funny.
And And you also said, now let's actually talk a little about your entrepreneurial journey. So you also had your own business, like you said. So tell us about, how did you get into entrepreneurship, and maybe key challenges you had to overcome? Anything you can share on that?
I don't. I'm not going to do a life story. I'll try and give you a condensed thing. As I said, I was always trying to sell stuff when I was a kid. Um, my dad had a business and plastics, making things from plastics, signs and what have you. So I learned a bit from him. The business side of things, my mum used to help out on. So I was aware of the idea and the concept of running a business and doing things. I used to sell things at school. My dad used to go to the wholesalers and we'd buy little assembly kits and what have you, and I'd sell them at school. And one day I got a call in from the headmaster and he said, "Come here, Gregory. So, so Gregory, I believe you've been working very hard to collect money for school funds." "What? No, sir." "What? Yes, you have. You've been selling items and making money, and I presume you've been doing this because you're going to give the money to the school for our funds." Uh, no, sir. No, I was collecting it. And what I actually said, "I'm not proud of this." I said, "I was collecting it so that I could buy my lunches because my mum and dad don't have much money, and I get hungry at, and I don't have the money to pay, and we can't, so I use the money to pay for my lunches." And he goes, "Oh, splendid. Well done. Carry on." And after that, in metalwork, we had a metalwork class. It was a great class, and there was a trend at the time for girls to have copper rings, which were a beaten copper ring. And I made one for my sister. And my sister, she went to the same school, and she showed it to her friends and said, "Oh, I want one." So I ended up getting sales girls in each year, and they got a commission on selling these rings. And
Oh, wow.
I bought this huge sheet of copper, and in our session, I would cut up all these copper rings and put them around the mandrel and beat them up, and I would produce all these rings, and then we'd go and sell them. And we were all doing very well. All these girls that I had in my downline, they were all doing well. Everybody's happy. Everybody had these rings on that I'd made. The whole school was wearing these rings. Even guys were
Oh,
wearing.
wow.
And, and then their fingers started going green. That's my first problem to deal with customer feedback, right? "My finger's going green. He's making my finger fall off." "No, it's not. It's just third degree." So there was a girls magazine at the time called Jackie, and this was a national problem, if you like, because these rings had become popular. And they said, what you need to do is to paint the inside with nail varnish and let it dry, and that will stop it affecting your finger. So at the time, I ran the school newspaper, and we had a duplicator thing. So I ran off a guide to maintenance of your ring, which these days would have other connotations, but at the time it just meant looking after your copy ring. And I gave it out to people as a bonus, as a sort of a customer care leaflet. And so we avoided having to give people their money back. Other lads tried to make rings, but I'd bought all the copper. I'd cornered the market. Yeah. So again, these are little lessons, for life,
Yeah.
how to deal with customers, how to solve problems, all of these things. Um, I read a book, like you've got your books there. I read all the classics, how
Yeah.
Think and Grow Rich and all the
Yeah, I've read
classic
that one.
Napoleon Hill jobbies, all that lot. How to Win Friends and Influence People. All,
Dale
all,
Carnegie.
all,
Yeah.
all of those books, I was an avid reader of them. And then in the fifth year, we had a visit from a monk. And this monk he was a beautiful man. And he was so calm. And he used to give us these lessons on life and how to plan our life and how to have a list of objectives in life. I remember him saying to us, write down what you're going to do in the next week, what you're going to do in the next month, what your plan is for next year, what your plan is for the next 5 years. And whenever he did that, he'd say, look at them and see your plan for the next 10 years. Is any part of it contained in what you plan to do in the next year? And of course, it wasn't. And he said, well, you're never going to get to the plan for the 10 years unless you include in it the things that you're doing now. And that's right. He says, so do a list of your objectives for life. And I did a list of my 10 things that I wanted to achieve in life. And I can proudly say that on that list, there are only two that are still remaining that I haven't done and probably
If
never
you
will
don't,
do, that I haven't
if you
yet
don't,
achieved.
what are those?
There were things on there like having a book published. I wanted to have a book published. I've had 3 books published. I wanted to run my own business. I've done a business. I wanted to tour the world and visit certain places in the world. I've done those things. But the top one, the number one, because my mum and dad were having marital difficulties, my number one was to be happily married. And I can say now, after 53 years of marriage, that I achieved that one. Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
And I wanted to have kids and for them to grow up and be successful. I can say we've managed that. So those are the key things. The bedrock of everything I've ever done has always been family based, always has been. I've turned down major businesses and major opportunities rather than not be at home. So anyway,
Wow.
so when I started, I decided that what I needed to do to get the foundation was to get jobs, to get work that would help me be able to be a better. We didn't use the term entrepreneur then. We used to use a businessman. So we'd say, right, I want to be a businessman. So I got jobs and I got promoted and I got into different things that taught me how to manage. I got into management. I went into sales. I got really great sales training. And then I got headhunted to be a sales director. And that was really good. And from that, I learned to do training. I did a lot of training of salespeople and a lot of presentations to customers. So that was good groundwork. Then I started doing training where people would pay me for me to train them to do the things that I'd been taught, and that developed that. Then something amazing happened. I'd read a book. I can't remember what the book was. It'll come back to me. But the essence of it, he says, it is better to have something where you earn a few pennies off millions of them rather than trying to earn a few £1,000s off one thing. In other words, to get royalties on something. So at first I thought it was going to be a book. I thought it was going to be something like that. But then I was at a pub for lunch with my cohort at the time, and there was a machine in the corner of the room which was a game called Space Invaders. You're too young to remember Space Invaders, but it was a big deal, right? It was going boom, 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 boom in the corner of the room, and they were, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And the young girl at the pub, she could play it. I used to pay her to play Space Invaders so that I could see all the patterns that could be produced and all the amazing results. And I thought, that is what I want to do. So I taught myself to program in a basic language. And at the time, the only computers you could get were something like well, these are lost in the annals of time now, but there were things like the Exody, the Sorcerer, the Ohio Superboard, and in Britain, Sinclair brought out the ZX80 and the ZX81. There was something came before that. And I was playing around with these, trying to get them to do games. And then something came out called the VIC-20, which I learned to program on. And I started doing a game. And I have to admit this, but I promise you, I've never done it since. I used to copy games. And there was one game called Chess. It was a great game, but nobody could copy it. But I found a way to copy it. And I had friends who were radio hams, and one of them announced over the radio that he knew somebody who could copy this program. And I was inundated with people saying, how do you copy it? How do you copy it? And one guy came along, a guy called Ivor Stones, great name, good lad, Ivor. And he and I just got on really well. And he could program. I mean, I could design, I could do graphics, but I was never very fast at programming. But it had taken me about 2 weeks to just make something scroll across the screen in a very lumpy, scrolly way. And he went, oh no, you need it like this. And he went, wow. I said, here's what we'll do. I'll do the designing and the planning. You do the coding. And that's what we did. We started selling those games through magazines. We went to exhibitions and we built up quite a number of sales. I went out and got them into Boots and Currys, and we were making them at home and selling them. But we were selling, well, thousands at £16 a
Wow.
time. We were making a lot of money and we were very happy doing it. I went to a computer, I went to a bank. And again, I was very naive. I didn't know all the ways you could finance a business at the time. I thought the only way basically was to get a loan from the bank. And I went to the bank. They said, oh, there's no future in games. They said, but these computers, people are buying computers. Why don't you open a computer shop? So, oh, okay. So I opened a computer shop and I joined a buying group, which was great. And we used to advertise on about 12 pages in magazines. And we'd have people driving to our shop from all over the Northwest. I'd sell 100, 200 computers in a month.
Wow.
And oh, yeah, we were making money it was like shelling peas. It was amazing. So that sort of sidetracked the computer games for a minute. Um, but because we had the shop, we would get lads coming in who were doing programming, but didn't know what to program. So I would design a game and tell them what they would do. They would program it. We would then package it. I'd design the packaging. And we built up a catalogue of, I don't know, about 8 games. And then I went to an exhibition in London and I met Commodore there. And we got on well together. So they started working with us. We started working with them. And we licensed a lot of our titles to them. And we were talking, by this time, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds we're making on this. Ivor's girlfriend then told him he had to stop messing about with computer games because there was no future in them and he should go and get a proper job. So he left me. Just fast forward to my 50th. I had a big party on my 50th. And Ivor came along and his then wife came up to Jim. She said, one of the biggest mistakes of my life was telling Ivor to stop doing computer games. I think you and he would be multimillionaires now if he'd have carried on. I said, well, yeah, because it set me back. When he left the team, I had to find replacement. You know, it took me at least a year to find a team of guys that I could work with to do computer games. And then we eventually sold the shop. I had 3 computer shops. I had one in Altrincham, one in Wilmslow, one in Swinton in Salford. We eventually sold the shops and we just focused on doing our own games, which we're doing well. But you've got to understand, if you're writing your own games, you've got to design, develop the game, and then you have to market it both to the distribution network and obviously to the end user. we did a few tricks along the way. So, for instance, we'd go to one of the wholesalers and they'd say, well, we're not stocking your game because there's no demand. So we would then phone up all the shops that were selling computer games and say, "Oh hi, have you got the XYZ from?" And they'd say, "No, we haven't." So we'd pretend that we were wanting this game. So all the shops would then ring up the wholesalers, say, "We've had a lot of people asking for XYZ," and so they'd say, "Oh yeah, we're getting demand for it now." So we would sell it, and then we would get them through. So we were creating our own demand by pretending that we wanted the game. So yeah, we did that. We did that for many years. I then switched from working, developing our own games and selling them to developing them for people like Activision. And I did a lot of work with British Telecom through their Firebird brand. And I did things for Micropose. I'm fast forwarding very quickly now. And then I flew over, did a big pitch to Atari, and Atari signed us up to do a series of 4 or 5 big titles for their handheld Lynx, and then we were working on their new game, the Jaguar. Though by that stage, games were it was costing a million, 1.5 million to do a game. Um, Unfortunately,
Wow.
that was going really really well. When unfortunately Atari had the plug pulled on them by Warner Brothers because of a bribery from Sony, and the result was that we suddenly were out of it. Well, it caused we, we had our eggs in too small a basket, so we had to shut down. Unfortunately, it coincided with me being very ill, and so I was in hospital for a year. And yeah, my son came back from university then, and I said, "What are you going to do, son?" And he said, "Well, this internet taking off now. Let's do some websites." So I used to sell the websites, and then we'd design. I'd do the graphics and stuff. He'd do the coding. So we built up a web design business. Then we've got some great premises, and we spent about 15, 16 years doing computer games and earning good money at that. Then we shifted over to doing web work, and we did about 15, 17 years doing that. We had thousands of square foot of thing and lots of employees and lots of success doing that until I retired, I don't know, 5 years ago. So yeah,
Nice.
we've never. I can say we've been comfortable. We've certainly been doing well, and I've enjoyed the ride. But I always put personal enjoyment ahead of. I mean, I know you've had other people on your thing that wanted to get a big car and whatever. I've never wanted a Rolls Royce. I've never wanted anything like that. I'm quite happy that, you know, I'm comfortable. The kids are happy. We got them through university. They've never been in jail. They've not done drugs, all that stuff. Those are the ticks in the boxes that I'm proud of, rather than that we sold a couple of million copies of a computer game.
I love it. Amazing. Amazing, Jim. Just last few questions as well. And you mentioned in your story when you were in school, you had the monk come in, and were you writing like your long-term goals
Yeah,
down? And
yeah,
then our first guest as well, as you know, Neil Ball, he talks about visualization and all that. So were you visualizing as well all your long-term goals?
yeah.
How does that work?
I used to sit down and work out how I was. My Another thing that the monk told us was to treat life as if you're a farmer. I love this.
Tell me more.
Well, if you think about farming, you've got your land. First of all, you've got to have your land. You've got to have your area that you're going to work in, if you like. But that applies to whatever you're doing. If you're going to be on the internet, if you're going to sell in a market, if you're going to whatever, that your land is the thing that's going to produce your income. And next, you've got to choose the timing of planting your seeds. You've got to choose which seeds you're going to plant. They've got to be ones which you're going to be able to sell, you hope. And then you've got to plant them properly. You've got to learn how to do the job of planting. And then you've got to maintain them. You've got to do all of these things can be copied over to any type of entrepreneurial activity, right? You've got to have your foundation, you've got to have your land, you've got to get the soil right, you've got to choose your seeds, you've got to plant them, you've got to maintain them, and then you've got to harvest them, and you've got to harvest them at the right time in the right place. And that applies to everything. But the important key to this is that a farmer doesn't just do things that need to be done that day. They plan what they're going to be doing in 6 months, 12 months. There is a cycle. And that's what people fail to do often, especially when they run their own business. They'll be on a sort of a feast or famine thing. They'll do a on the phone trying to get work. They'll get the work. They'll work on the work. That will finish. So they're on the phone again trying to get some more work, no matter what the title is. So they might be doing online selling. They'll do all the online selling, sell it, then do it again. They don't have a cycle in which they're investing now for the future. And that attitude to life, to everything, is to know where you're going to go with it, where you're going to plan, how it's going to fit in the future. Are you doing things now which are building for the future, or are they just things that are just for today? And that's not you've got to do some fun things for the day, of course you have, and there's some things you've just got to do, but you should always allocate a section of your time to things which could bear fruit in the future. You've got to plant the seeds for the future. Val and I, my wife and I, often call it the bottle in the sea. You know the song "Message in the Bottle." You're on a desert island. You've got to survive day to day, but you want to get rescued. So every now and again, you put a message in a bottle and throw it out into the sea. It has no chance, really, of being found and you being rescued. But you've got absolutely zero, zero, zero chance if you never do it. So there are lots of things like that that are worth doing for the chance that they're going to bear fruits and going to be result. A gardener will tell you that. Sometimes you plant something, you think it's not going to grow, and it grows better than something that, whatever. This applies to nearly everything you do. Often the thing that you invest time in isn't the thing that makes you the money. It's something else that you just put a little bit of time in. Here's an example. We once had a customer who did dust extraction, and their market was coal mines. They did dust extraction for coal mines. And we were doing a website for them, and we were doing all what they do and how they do it and all that. And I said, do you know? He said, well, we also have a bit of a business where we do central vacuum cleaning. So what's that? He said, well, you have a big vacuum in your garage, and then you have tubes all around the house. And so instead of carrying a vacuum cleaner around, you just plug the nozzle in and you clean, and it goes into a central collection. And but big houses have these. He said, but it's only a small part of our business. And I said, it sounds great. Let's do a special section on your website that focuses on it. Then you might get more business. He said, yeah, okay. So we built, in fact, in the end, we did a separate website focused just on central vacuum cleaning, right? Now, again, you're too young to know this, but we used to have people going digging for coal. They used to dig coal out of the ground, and then it used to be used for people to warm their houses. Doesn't happen anymore, of course, because, well, certain people decided we didn't want mining anymore, and it was environmentally unfriendly or whatever. So this customer suddenly had no customers. There were no mines anymore. There was nobody wanted dust extraction. And I phoned him up and said, I think he said, oh God, Jim, he said, if it hadn't been for the central vacuum cleaning thing, we'd be out of business. Now 95% of our business is coming from that area that used to be 1% of our business. Yeah. If they'd not invested in that extra, and there's loads of examples of this where companies have been doing something that they thought was their main business, but it was only because they did something else that saved them. It's a classic, and that's why everybody needs to have alternatives, other irons in the fire, as they say.
100%.
Yeah, you've got to have irons in the fire. I had another. I do some coaching and mentoring, and we had a girl. There was a girl that I I was helping with public speaking, and she also had a mentor who was advising her with life choices or something. And I said, well, "What have you been at?" She said, "Well, she's come up with a plan for me." I said, "She's come up with your plan?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, it's rather best if you come up with your own plan." You
Yeah.
know, I would usually suggest that people do their own plan rather than have somebody give them a plan. But what is it? She says, "Well," she told me, she said, "because I want to be a famous writer and public speaker." So she says, "I'll never achieve it whilst I'm full time working for the company I'm working for." I said, "But it's a really good job." She was on about 50, 60,000 pounds a year. I said, "You're on a good job. Why don't you write the book that you want to write, take some days off to go and do presentations and build up that business? Then you can leave once it's replacing the income." And she said, "No, no, no. My advisors told me that it will never happen that way. I need to be strong. I need to pack in my job and go and do it." She says, "It's only, if you read all the people that have been successful, they all just did it." And I said, "No, you're only reading the ones that happen to be successful. For every one person that just did it, there's loads of others that did it but didn't do it and are now on the dole, right?" So anyway, she did that, and she had a year's worth of money put aside, and after a year, she hadn't achieved anything like a dream. And she had to move back with her parents in down south. And last I saw on Facebook, she was earning a living as a Disney princess, going out to parties dressed up as a princess. That was not her dream. Yeah, but that's what people do. They read something, one of these get rich quick
Schemes, yeah.
guides, and they think and it doesn't work that way. You know, I mean, there's a story about, there's lots of stories like there's guys that maxed out their credit cards because they had a dream to do a film and they produced the film and it was accepted at Sundance. And the next thing you know, they're a famous producer. Yeah, but there are thousands of people who maxed out their credit cards and ended up in debt and ended up not doing that. So much as I appreciate people want to have a hero story, sometimes it's better to just have a plan and to build things gradually to get to the stage where they're working instead of expecting overnight success.
No, 100%, 100%, Jim. Thank you for sharing that. Last question I have for you before we wrap up. So, what's the best life advice you've received?
Well, just enjoy it and have fun. I mean, it's no good frowning all the day. And I mean, I have often been criticized as being flippant. I've been criticized for being unserious when serious things are apparently required. And I mean, life is too short to treat everything seriously. You can have fun and be serious. It is possible to do that. And yes, sure, other people will think that you're a flake or something, that you're not really into it. But bottom line is, if you're enjoying things, that's about all you can achieve. I mean, I often talk about the cardboard box. You know, you haven't got kids, have you? Said no, but you might have seen this. You can give a child a new toy, and they often play with the box that it came in. Yeah, because it's more interesting to them. If you look at a film or video of people in the third world, they're playing and having fun with the ball, just a simple ball. They haven't got they haven't got a Nintendo or a PlayStation or anything to play with. You see, the human nature only has a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of happiness, right? And that scale, if you get super rich, you don't get to 15 because there is no 15. It just moves the scale. So you have to spend more and do more and whatever to get to that fun 10 level. And you can do that fun 10 level if you just change your perspective. You can enjoy life just as much. once you're feeding yourself, once you've somewhere to sleep, a roof over your head, that is really all you need. And after that, you can invest your time in things which you enjoy, things that are family based, things that are positive, and dare I say, you can do things that help other people as well. Because there is no better feeling than feeling that you've helped somebody else to achieve what they're trying to achieve. That is a
Amazing.
a joy in itself. It really, really is.
100%. 100%, Jim. Thank you so much. It's amazing to talk to you today. Thank you, Jim, once again. And thank you for our listeners as well to tune in. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure you comment down below what's your biggest key takeaway from this episode. And make sure you like and subscribe and follow the show, because that will help me get more interesting guests like Jim on the show.
Like and
So,
subscribe.
like and subscribe. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jim, once again. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, Sid.